Well, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for asking.
My pleasure. Now, what people don't realize, and actually I didn't realize until I ran into you, that there are some states that have someone like you on their payroll to help, like, local and city municipalities and nonprofit organizations get grants.
Right, there are a number of states. It's not a huge number, but I'd say 5 to 10 states have a person who the title may not be grants director. That's the director. Under Governor O'Malley, there is a governor's grants office, and the core part of my job is to make sure that state government is accessing all the federal funds that we should be. And in the typical state budget, about 25% of the dollars are federal dollars. In the case of Maryland, we get those $6.5 billion through about 475 different funding streams.
Most 475 different budget items from the federal government.
Right, ranging from Medicaid is our largest single grant, which is well over $3 billion, but then we get some small competitive grants. So I have we have a small office. It's just 3 of us, but we have a key contact in every state agency who's responsible for tracking federal funds and grants. And that's the core function of the office. But in the process of doing that, we do a lot of training with with the state folks on not just how to find grants, but how to manage them. And over the years, we've sort of expanded. So we really do help local governments, nonprofits, and even constituents. So we have, we're their state government. We're paid by them. So we help regardless of who's calling or who's being involved.
So you help, in addition to the state government offices, you're helping, you said, local, city, and state. So, I mean, if you live in a city of Maryland and you're trying to get something to change in your city, theoretically you go to your city government and ask them to call you to find out what kind of money maybe the city to put up a new playground or something like that in their city, or to improve their city.
Yeah, I mean, Maryland is fortunate in that we only have 23 counties and Baltimore City. So we have a smaller number of local governments than many states. So we have built up pretty good contacts in each of the local governments. We do have a lot of municipalities, but the counties tend to run most of the public programs in the state.
So even, you need a new fire truck at the fire station or something like that.
Well, and even that's interesting too, because they're volunteer firefighters, they're professional firefighters, they're Fire Act grants, which are small and competitive, but then emergency management money also flows through the counties. So if you're a fire department, there's a variety of different things you have to know to be good at doing your job, not just.
So I think the average person may not be aware of is that if you want to improve your community, and the community needs funds to do something, I mean, they could check their state government to see if there's someone like you to help their local community find federal funds to improve their community.
They could, but again, as you know, a lot of this it's just talking to people, just having the time and the inclination and the effort to start talking. So say, okay, who runs the park in my local city or county? That can get you to how they're funded, which could get you to the state, could get you to foundations. So it's just being willing and interested enough to
effort.
No, and that's a big part of it. A lot of it isn't money. So while
a lot of it
it's not money. It's we need a project. So a local getting a playground fixed, you could have volunteers do that too. So a lot of times people might say, well, I need X number of dollars for this project, but in fact you don't. The goal is, what do you want to accomplish? There are a lot of different ways to do it. So while it's easy to measure dollars coming in, that's not the whole part of what I do.
So would your office help constituents with those kind of issues too? I mean, to think through the problem or direct them to where to think through that problem? I mean, would it be a touchstone? Is it, like, I want to clean up the park. How do they call up and they want $100 million to clean up the park or something, and sort of direct them somewhere where they could maybe do it in other ways.
Right, and the more specific the request, the better we can do. So a question like, well, my park is a mess here. What can I do to clean it up? It leads to a whole number of issues, which is who's responsible for maintenance of the park. And the discussion can go in a variety of different directions. So if somebody calls and says, we need money, that's just about the worst type of call.
Right.
If there's a real an issue that's involved, it's our job to know state government pretty well, to know which agencies have a particular expertise, because whatever call I get, I will know less than the person in our parks department, in the insurance department, whatever the issue is. But we have to know who we have in state government that can best get the questions answered.
Do you recall any examples like that that you or the staff has handled, and recent times that had calls like that? I mean, so people could relate to a specific.
Well, I mean, since you mentioned parks, and we had a very specific case, there's a small municipality called Williamsport on the Potomac River in Maryland. And next time you're in Williamsport, at one time it was actually under consideration to be the national capital a long time ago.
Really?
Didn't make it.
And this is where? On the Potomac somewhere?
It's in Maryland. Yeah. And they had very active mayor and local staff saying they wanted to do work on parks, and they particularly wanted them to be accessible to the disabled. They had,
I see.
Some children they knew about, and it was very interesting to get the initial call to work with them. And there was a combination of we do have a state program that does some playground repair funding, but there also were foundation opportunities, and I remember getting the email afterwards saying, just so you know, we're done. Here it is, and here was the picture. So it sort of makes you feel good to take the initial question right on through to completion.
So you were able to guide him towards state funding to have wheelchair accessible parks or something like this, right? And private funding for foundation money.
Just to talk to him about that. We try to help people become aware. In the state of Maryland, there are about 1,400 foundations headquartered here, and that'll be typical of every state. And they range from very large, famous ones that people have heard of. The Annie Casey Foundation is our biggest one, to very small ones that no one's heard of. And part of our job is just to, much like what you do, is access to information, and the more people can know which funders are actually incorporated and pay taxes in their county, the better chance you have to get something like that taken care of.
So there's 1,400 foundations in the state,
and we're not a big state.
Yeah.
And some of these will be very small family foundations, and may not encourage unsolicited proposals, but the information's out there. They have to file 990 tax forms. You can track down to at least see what they funded in the past, see who's on their board. And depending on the issue, something like a small playground in a community, it's the perfect thing for a small foundation to be interested in.
And how about even like small community groups? I mean, if you want to train teenagers or after-school programs, you want to set. I mean, somebody that wants to start their own nonprofit organization and looking for assistance and things like that. I mean, I think you're implying it's the same kind of route to go through.
It is, and even that's interesting. In the state of Maryland, we have a Maryland Association of Nonprofits, which some states have and some don't, and ours is particularly strong. And it's a very good group, and we partner with them pretty nicely on a lot of issues. And a lot of small nonprofits will go to them on the very basics of what do I need to incorporate legally, what types of tax issues are involved, how do I form a board. So that's a good group to get things started. But if we get a small nonprofit or someone who wants to start that, again, the question usually becomes, what do you want to do? And if it's after-school care or, okay, we got these kids hanging out, we need something to do.
Right.
That could get you back to parks. It could get you back to the school system. So a lot of this, it's very unusual to say there's just one right competitive grant that gets me the money, but getting the conversation started. Yeah. And again, Maryland is more fortunate in our small number of local governments. You really can usually get to the people you need pretty quickly here.
Wow. I mean, you sound like me. You're trying to make it sound easy and sell books. Yeah. But the process, I mean, I guess the process, it takes effort, but there's no magic to it. I mean that's what I guess you're saying behind this. No, and the effort's involved.
Right. So for the person who's just calls up, I want some money.
Right.
And it does take effort, but most things do. So it shouldn't be surprising. and most public dollars are tied to public policy. So which you can track back to state and federal law. And each issue, it's kind of interesting to hunt down.
Well, that's interesting because I run into a lot of individuals who really want to solve problems in their community, and they don't know how to go about it, and so you're saying here you're not even sure where the funding is for a specific problem, and it's not until you start digging up those stones and turning them over and looking that you run into a possible funding source.
Or an organization that already does what you want to do. So frequently someone will call and I really want to do something for the kids here.
Right.
kids in trouble with the law, kids not getting
Right.
good grades, and then part of our job is to help them see, is anyone else already doing what they're doing?
see.
It's a lot easier to partner
Right.
with
I
someone
mean,
else.
part of these 1,400 nonprofits that may be there already doing it.
And that's it. And it's also possible to track nonprofits because they too have to file tax
Yes.
forms by county. So before,
Oh, I see.
in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of interest in prisoner reentry.
Mm-hmm.
Some federal money for it. A lot of people, it's a really good, it's a really good issue. It gets people on the left and the right working together.
Right.
They all care about reducing crime, but helping kids also and reducing recidivism rates. And a big piece of what we've tried to do is tie people who are interested into organizations already doing the work, which is very different than going out looking for your own grants and starting a new
Right,
organization.
exactly. So you could hook them up with somebody who has an infrastructure to solve that problem, and then you can work through them to do the same thing you wanted to do yourself, in other words.
And that goes for the schools too. Anything dealing with children. And we have countywide school systems in Maryland, which is different than a lot of places, but they're pretty big. And a lot of times, if there's any issue that touches kids, there might be either an answer or the next person to talk to is tied up in the school system somewhere.
So what would you look for? I mean, if you're sitting in Iowa or Idaho or any of the I states, let's say, well, I want to. How do you find out if there's an office like you in your state?
Well, the easiest thing, you actually call the governor's office.
Just call the governor's office.
Every governor's office,
Would know,
wherever they are, is pretty well staffed to handle constituent calls. And everyone I've seen is pretty good at seeing, taking a question like this, getting an answer. It may end up, some states it'll be in the budget office. Some states it could be an office of community initiatives, something that deals with nonprofits. So you may go in different directions. But simply getting started that way is a really good place to go. And congressional offices too are really well suited to taking first calls. Oh, I was thinking about this. You call a congressional office,
I see. Huh.
and they too, especially in the district offices, not out of D.C., are pretty good at knowing what's going on in there.
So even in the congressional, I mean, your congressman and senator's office, it's better to call the one near you versus calling Washington.
Right.
Yeah.
They'll help both ways, but the Washington staff tend to be focused on legislation.
Right.
And most of the good people in our congressional delegation, though it varies because we're a small enough state that getting to Washington isn't hard. But in the I states, you're talking about the people that are based in the district offices will be more in tune to local governments, local foundations, and even the state government.
I see. Yeah. You mentioned also you had a conference coming up. Like, I guess you do this once a year.
Yeah, once.
And who's this for? This conference? That was interesting.
Yeah, over the years we do a lot of training, and that's state government doesn't have a lot of money, neither do nonprofits. But there's a lot of interest in training people, not just looking for and winning grants, but how do you manage them afterwards? Especially federal grants can be pretty complicated. There's a lot of circulars and rules you have to follow and audit findings you want to avoid. So as we've done this training, it's really been popular for folks who don't, as a full-time job, they don't want to be an expert on federal grants.
Yes.
They need enough information to handle these one or two a year that they might have. So as we've done these trainings, we realized it was nice one day a year to roll them into a single event. So this year, it'll be September 8th in College Park, Maryland, for anyone who wants to come from anywhere.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing we actually charge money for because it's grown, so it's become so popular. We actually need a real live facility with food coming in.
You just can't have it in your backyard anymore.
No, and most of the smaller sessions we can sort of get away with that.
Yeah.
But for one day we have local governments, nonprofits, we have federal speakers come in, so it's everything from full-time grants managers to small nonprofits or people thinking about starting a nonprofit. You can access, at least in our state, the key state contacts all in one place on that day.
Wow.
And this year, one thing we're doing for the first time is, as of this year, just about every federal grant has to be applied for online, and you have to have multiple things in order. You need your IRS number in order, a Dun & Bradstreet number, a central contracting registry, and grants.gov. You need all these things to work before the application can be accepted. And at the conference, we will have all of the federal groups right there to make sure people can at least get their paperwork in order.
Wow.
They can walk into a room, the computers will be all hooked up. Instead of just talking about, here's what you do on the website, we're going to have them sitting right there.
I got to come and just steal some information there. So you're saying, so if I had a small nonprofit in Maryland or thinking about it, that this conference would be a good place to attend, number one, sources of funding, but also what's required to apply. And as you're saying now, what percentage particularly was online?
As of this year, it should be almost 100% of federal grants must be applied for online. So if you're
100% of federal grants online, you have to apply, right?
Grants.gov is the federal website, and anyone can get on that and sign up for emails. Every day you can get an email. Every new federal grant that's been posted overnight, it comes in the middle of the night. But if you want to apply for any of those, and most of these people wouldn't be eligible for. They're very specific. This one's for Indian tribes. This one's only for states.
Exactly.
But to actually do the application, you need a number of things in order and registration system. So you can't say that you're applying for money for a particular charity if in fact you're not that charity. So it's become pretty awkward, especially if you're used to just handwriting an application and sending it in the mail. Which, so it's been an interesting challenge, and that goes for state governments too. You think
so? I mean, your state has to do that online to get the funding next year.
Every single grant, be it formula or competitive, has to be done online. And I can't think of a single grant application this year the state has not done that hasn't been done electronically.
Wow. And so that's even for the recurring grants and things like that. Because you get automatically.
Because there's also new federal laws that have increased there's a website requirement that every federal grant or contract must be posted onto a website within 30 days of the award being made. And that just took effect last year. So there's a reason you want the whole process to be done electronically, from application right on through to the award.
Now, that's 30 days. What has to happen again?
30 days after a grant award is made or a contract is made, this information must be posted on a single
like who got
website.
It kind of thing.
Name, how much money.
I see.
It's pretty basic information. In the past, you could pick this up, but sometimes it took a while to get census data. Sometimes it was a bit slow in coming. So this new law, which it just took effect, is really having a dramatic change on this. But it means...
Is this the one Obama's bragging about he did?
Obama was the co-sponsor. Coburn and Obama were co-sponsors of this. And it's and many states have repeated this. So there was a Maryland law passed this year.
Doing the same thing?
And it was just signed into law last week by the governor, which will require us to do the same thing on state grants and state procurement.
Is that a central source for all the information, or it just has to be, HHS, Department of Health and Human Services giving out, they put it on their website?
This is a central office. So the Office of Management and Budget is responsible for implementing this, and they've got to get their hands around everyone from the National Science Foundation to the Health and Human Services.
So OMB's website is publishing this now?
OMB has it up now, and it's just started, and it's there are other requirements kicking in.
I see.
On sub-grantee data will have to be posted in another year or so.
That's good for guys like me to know.
No, but it's very much it's sort of a bipartisan good government thing. You may not like the other person's group, but you have every right to say where the money's going. So as you've seen over the years, the feds slowly are getting better at sharing information on this.
Well, it was always there, but just was bored to get it. You got Freedom of Information Acts and all this kind of stuff.
No, so even the fact that grants.gov has every new federal grant notice in one place seems like an obvious thing, and yet that's fairly new. That's really just a couple of years ago that they've had that.
And you're saying Maryland now has a similar process. Well, just signed into law. It's really
a similar law that must put all the information. So right now, if you're a private company that wants to do procurement, if you want, the state of Maryland purchases lots of goods and services like the federal government, our Department of General Services has a pretty good website for how you can access new contracts coming up and also track the money that's going out. But this law says everything, every state dollar that's going out. So that includes grants, which are different than procurement, and it's got to be in the same place. You can't send people moving around from agency to agency to do that.
And that's called General. What was that?
In Maryland, it'll be our Department of General Services. And every state will have something similar. And the laws on procurement, there's certain rules when things have to be bid out over a certain dollar amount and who can be eligible.
The awards in Maryland, are they up yet for contracts or not?
The contracts piece, the information is there on the website, and the grants part is pieces of that come through my office. But that'll be a challenge.
You're the holdup. Huh?
Well, I hope not. But that'll be a challenge to put this together.
I can imagine.
Each agency does their own thing, and when money comes to us and we move it through, it ties into our accounting system. There's a lot of reasons it's difficult to do, but it's a good thing to do, and the governor is glad to sign it in the law, and it'll be a fun challenge to make it work.